Eleanor Ashford raised her champagne glass toward the woman who had been sharing her husband's bed for 3 years. The great dining hall fell silent. In that breathless pause, crystal shattered against marble as the Duke of Ravenswood dropped his goblet at his feet. It was the first honest moment of her marriage. Her name was Eleanor Ashford, or at least it had been before she became Duchess of Ravenswood at 19. She was the eldest daughter of Baron Ashford, a man with an old title and an empty purse. From childhood, she had known what that meant. Her looks and her manners were her family's last treasures. Her mother taught her how to stitch perfect flowers into silk, how to play the piano well enough to impress but never overshadow, how to enter a room with calm grace even when fear twisted inside her chest. She learned to smile while aching to cry, to stay quiet when anger burned in her throat. Only later did she understand that these lessons were meant to shape her into something beautiful and silent. The Duke came in autumn. She remembered the day clearly. Leaves burned gold and red in the trees around their modest estate. Sunlight slanted through the windows as her father announced a visitor of great importance. Eleanor did not yet know that men had already traded letters about her future, that her life had been weighed and priced like cattle at market. She only knew she must wear her best gown and be pleasing. Sebastian Blackwell, 6th Duke of Ravenswood, was 32 when she first saw him. He filled the doorway like winter itself, tall and broad, dark hair sharp against pale skin, eyes cold and gray as frozen water. He was striking enough to steal breath, yet his gaze unsettled her. He studied her as one might study a rare object, measuring worth rather than spirit. Their courtship lasted 3 weeks. He visited 4 times. He spoke to her only a handful of moments. Never once did he ask what she loved or feared or dreamed of. He talked with her father about land and dowries and connections. One quiet evening over dinner, Eleanor was informed she would become Duchess of Ravenswood before Christmas. Her mother cried with joy. Her father looked lighter than he had in years. Eleanor folded her hands in her lap and felt as though she were watching her life from across a wide river, unable to cross. She did not love Sebastian on her wedding day. She barely knew him. But she had been raised to believe love was not meant for women like her. She promised herself she would be a good wife, earn his respect through patience and care. Perhaps affection would grow with time. Those thoughts followed her down the long cathedral aisle, her fingers shaking on her father's arm. Their wedding night ended those hopes. Sebastian entered her room with stiff politeness, finished his duty without warmth, and left without a word. Eleanor lay awake in the dark, staring at the carved canopy above her bed, while something inside her folded inward, like a flower closing against frost. She had expected awkwardness. She had not expected emptiness. The months that followed set the shape of her life. Sebastian spent most of his time away in the city. When he returned to Blackwood Manor, it was for days at most. He never raised his voice. He never insulted her. He treated her with distant courtesy that hurt more than cruelty. She filled her days with work. She oversaw servants, kitchens, gardens, linens, silver. She hosted teas and dinners for neighbors, smiling until her cheeks ached. She wrote letters home describing beauty and comfort and a husband who was kind. She became very skilled at lying. At night she wandered the halls alone, fingers brushing dusty portraits of long-dead dukes and duchesses. She wondered if those women had felt the same hollow ache. Sometimes she stood at the tall windows watching moonlight spill across the lawns and allowed herself to cry in silence. She told herself this was simply marriage. Her mother had lived such a life. So had her grandmother. Women endured. Women adapted. Wanting more was foolish. Expecting more was dangerous. So Eleanor buried her longing and built a calm mask over it. By the 3rd year, she was exactly what had been purchased. A flawless duchess. A quiet ornament. Everything broke at the Hardington Spring Ball. The room glittered with mirrors and chandeliers, silk gowns and polished shoes. It was her first London event beside Sebastian in over a year, and she had foolishly let hope flutter in her chest. She stood near the refreshment table when she heard voices behind her. Two women whispered too loudly for secrets. Lady Piton sighed with fake pity. Such a shame about the Duchess. Sweet little thing. Does she truly not know? Mrs. Whitmore gave a sharp laugh. Everyone knows Vivian Hartley has kept him for years. The marriage was only for show. The Duchess is nothing but a broodmare with a title. The words struck like ice water. Vivian Hartley, beautiful red-haired widow. Daring gowns, admired and whispered about everywhere. Her husband's mistress. Eleanor did not remember leaving the ballroom. She only remembered sinking onto a velvet bench in a shadowed hall, hand over her mouth as breath came too fast and thin. Scenes she had ignored rose sharp and cruel. His long absences, strange perfume, sudden silences when she entered rooms she had chosen not to see. The next morning she returned to Blackwood Manor alone, claiming illness. Sebastian barely noticed her leaving. The 8-hour carriage ride passed in blur. She imagined him laughing with Vivian, touching her, whispering things Eleanor had never heard. By sunset, she had sworn she would confront him. A week passed. Her anger cooled into doubt. He had never promised love. She had been the one to hope. When he returned, she smiled and poured his wine and said nothing. That night, she cried until dawn. On the fourth morning, tears burned away softness and left something sharp behind. She would not stay silent. The autumn dinner at Blackwood Manor was famous. 200 guests, 12 courses, musicians from the city. It was the one night each year she and Sebastian played perfect hosts together. She took control of every detail. When the guest list crossed her desk, she added one name: Lady Vivian Hartley. Sebastian paused when he read it. His eyes flicked up. I did not know you knew her. Eleanor smiled gently. We met last summer. I found her charming. I hope you do not mind. Something unreadable moved in his gaze, but he nodded. She spent weeks planning, rehearsing words in front of mirrors, imagining faces draining of color. She chose a midnight blue gown and wore diamonds like armor. Vivian arrived in crimson silk, red hair glowing under chandeliers. Eleanor saw the glance Vivian shared with Sebastian, the light touch on his sleeve. The laugh meant only for him. She crossed the room and greeted her with perfect grace. I do try to care for what belongs to me, Eleanor said sweetly. Vivian's smile wavered. Dinner was announced. Eleanor had placed Vivian where all could see her. Dessert ended. Footman poured champagne. Eleanor rose. Silence rolled across the table. I would like to offer a toast, she said. Glasses lifted. To loyalty, to honesty. She raised her own high. To the woman brave enough to love my husband in secret for 3 years. Faces froze. To Lady Vivian Hartley. Silence crashed down. Vivian turned white. Sebastian's glass slipped from his hand and shattered at his feet. Eleanor finally looked at her husband. For the first time in 3 years, she saw fear in his eyes. Eleanor did not look back as she left the great dining hall. The heavy doors closed behind her, sealing in the shock, the whispers, the scandal that would spread through society before dawn. Her shoes echoed against the marble floor as she walked the long corridors of Blackwood Manor with her head held high, though her heart thundered in her chest like it meant to break free. Only when she reached her chambers did her strength give way. She locked the door, leaned against it, and slid slowly to the floor. Her hands shook. Her breath came in short gasps. She laughed once, sharp and broken, then pressed her fist to her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. 3 years of silence had ended in one sentence. There was no return now. She had burned everything. The clock struck midnight before she heard footsteps outside her door. Heavy, familiar, unmistakable. Sebastian. He did not knock at first. He stood there, close enough that she could feel his presence through the wood. When he spoke, his voice was stripped of command and pride. Eleanor. please." She remained seated by the fire, staring into the flames. "I know you can hear me," he said. "Please let me explain." "There is nothing to explain," she replied calmly. "You had a mistress. I was made a fool. Now everyone knows." Silence stretched, then his voice again, quieter. "I am sorry." She laughed, bitter and low. "Sorry for betraying me, or sorry you were exposed." A pause. Then both. She rose and crossed the room, stopping just short of the door. She placed her palm flat against it, feeling the barrier between them. "For 3 years," she said, "you treated me as though I did not exist. You never asked who I was. You never cared to know. And now you stand there asking for forgiveness." A dull sound came from the other side, something heavy meeting the floor. Her breath caught. He was kneeling. "You are right," Sebastian said, his voice rough. "I was cruel. I married you for convenience. I looked at you and saw only what you could give me. And that is my greatest sin." His words slid into the cracks she had sealed so carefully. But they came too late. "Tomorrow I will leave," she said. "I will go to my family, and I will not return." "No," he said quickly. "Please. Stay. Hate me if you must, but stay." She shook her head, though he could not see it. "You never noticed my presence before. Do not pretend you fear my absence now." "I see you now," he said, "and if you leave, I will carry that loss forever." She closed her eyes. "Tomorrow," she said at last. "I will decide tomorrow." His footsteps retreated. Eleanor did not sleep. She watched moonlight crawl across the floor and wondered if this was truth or desperation. At dawn, she made her choice. She sent word that she wished to see Sebastian in the library. He arrived quickly, pale and drawn, standing before her like a man awaiting judgment. "I will stay," she said, "but I have conditions." He nodded at once. "First, Lady Hartley is gone from your life. Completely. Done. Second, you will no longer disappear for weeks. If you go to the city, I go with you." "Yes." "Third," she said, her voice steady, "you will see me." "Truly see me? I want to," he said. "I swear it." The days that followed felt strange and careful, like walking across thin ice. Sebastian kept his promises. He ended the affair in writing and let her read every word. He stayed at the manor. He ate meals with her. He asked questions and listened to answers. It was awkward at first. She watched him closely, waiting for cold distance to return. Sometimes she saw it flicker, old habits trying to reclaim him. But he stayed. He told her about his childhood, about a father who ruled with fear, a home without warmth, a life built on walls. "I did not know how to love," he said. "I only knew how to protect myself." Understanding did not erase pain, but it softened its edges. One evening, as they sat by the fire, he reached for her hand. Slowly, carefully, she let him take it. Something shifted. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. They traveled together. They spoke late into the night. He stood beside her in rooms where once she had stood alone. He introduced her proudly. He laughed more easily. He watched her with a focus that made her heart ache. Trust returned in small pieces. One night in the gardens under a pale moon, he stopped and faced her. "I love you," he said simply. The words stunned her. She searched his face and saw no mask. "I love you too," she whispered. They came together then not out of duty, but choice. From that night forward, the marriage changed. Joy followed slowly, carefully, as if afraid to break the fragile peace they had built. A year later, she learned she was with child. Sebastian wept openly when she told him. Their daughter was born on a snowy evening, dark-haired, gray-eyed. Love filled the manor. 2 years later came their son. The Duke, who had once been carved from ice, now knelt on the floor, letting children climb his back, laughter echoing through halls once silent. Years passed. On their 10th anniversary, Sebastian gifted her a painting of their family beneath the trees of Blackwood Manor. "Do you remember your toast?" he asked quietly. She smiled. "I remember." "It destroyed me," he said, "and saved me." She leaned into him, watching their children run through golden light. The past no longer hurt. It had built them. And Eleanor Ashford, once silent and invisible, finally knew she had claimed the life she deserved. Years passed, and with them came a quiet strength that settled deep into Eleanor's bones. The sharp pain that had once defined her days faded into memory, no longer a wound but a scar that reminded her how far she had traveled. Blackwood Manor no longer felt like a beautiful prison. It felt like home. Sebastian kept every promise he had made. He never returned to his old habits. London trips were shared journeys now, filled with carriage rides spent talking instead of silence. He sought her thoughts before decisions, listened to her opinions, and valued them. Society noticed the change. Whispers followed them, but they no longer cut. Eleanor had learned that scandal only holds power when one bows to it. Motherhood changed her in ways she had never expected. Charlotte grew into a thoughtful child with steady eyes and a curious mind. James followed, bold and laughing, always chasing his sister through the halls. Eleanor watched Sebastian with their children and sometimes felt overwhelmed by the contrast between the man he had been and the father he had become. He knelt to their level, listened to their worries, apologized when he was wrong. He broke the chain that had once bound him. Eleanor found her own voice growing stronger with each year. She oversaw estate matters with confidence, spoke openly at gatherings, and no longer softened her thoughts to please others. People listened. Some admired her, some feared her honesty. She did not care. She had learned that dignity did not come from silence, but from truth. One afternoon, while walking through the gardens with Charlotte, her daughter asked a question that made Eleanor stop. "Mother," Charlotte said, "why do people look at you the way they do when you enter a room?" Eleanor smiled gently. "Because they remember who I was and see who I became." "Were you afraid once?" Charlotte asked. Eleanor knelt before her. "Yes, very afraid." "But you are not now," Charlotte said. "No," Eleanor replied. "I am not." That night, she told Sebastian about the conversation. He listened quietly, then took her hands. "You taught me something," he said. "That love without honesty is only a shadow. You saved me by refusing to remain invisible." She leaned against him, watching the fire glow low. We saved each other. Society eventually found new scandals. Vivian Hartley faded from memory, her name spoken only in whispers tied to that infamous dinner. Eleanor never spoke of her again. There was no need. She no longer lived in comparison or fear. On a cool autumn evening, many years after the toast that shattered crystal and pride, Blackwood Manor hosted another dinner. The guests arrived with laughter and warmth, not expectation of spectacle. Eleanor moved through the hall with calm grace, Sebastian always near her side. No masks, no secrets. As dessert was served, Sebastian rose unexpectedly. He lifted his glass, his voice steady. "I wish to offer a toast," he said. The room quieted. "To my wife," he continued. "The bravest woman I know. The woman who demanded truth when lies were easier. The woman who taught me how to love." Eleanor felt tears gather as every eye turned toward her. Not with pity, with respect. She stood and met his gaze. "And to my husband," she said softly, "the man who chose to change. The man who proved that love is not found. It is built," glasses clinked. That night, as the manor settled into silence, Eleanor stood at the window watching the moon rise over the gardens. Sebastian joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. That night, the toast, She thought of the girl she had been. 19. Hopeful. Invisible. No, she said. It gave me my life. He kissed her hair. And mine. In the distance, she could hear Charlotte laughing softly in her sleep, James turning restlessly in his bed. Proof of everything they had built from ruins. Eleanor rested her hand over Sebastian's heart and felt its steady rhythm. Once, she had raised a glass in defiance. Now, she raised her life in quiet victory, and this time nothing shattered.